Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Ask Megan. I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this conversation and this topic today because it's something that I've been both really interested in and really passionate about for really the last 6 months or so. And it's this topic of trust. One of the things that I've realized is that the goal in customer experience is very often to create experiences that build trust, especially in B2B, where you're not necessarily going to make a sale in every interaction or lose a sale, right? There are a lot of things that happen in between how you interact with a customer and an eventual purchase, renewal, upsell decision. So, in the interim, the goal of all of our efforts to manage customer experience are about building and maintaining trust. And so, I was running a table discussion at a conference that I was at a couple of weeks ago on this topic of how do you earn and keep customer trust. And one of the attendees asked a question that I know is on a lot of people's minds. Okay, so earning trust has always been difficult. It's even harder now that most things we do are digital, right? Most interactions are digital. A lot of them don't even involve a human. And the ones that do are like this, right? Where it might be two humans, but it's two humans interacting through a screen. And we sort of instinctively know that that's a different beast, building trust in that environment. And it is. So I wanted to share with you guys some of the advice that I gave her on how do you approach trust differently, or where do you focus if you're really concerned with or really focused on making sure that the distance that digital communication creates doesn't get in the way of forming and keeping trust with your customers. So when she first asked me this question, the first question I asked her in return was, when you say, how do we, are you talking about we, the organization, or we, the employees, the individuals? And of course, she said both. So I gave an answer on both levels. And I'll start with what I think the royal we, if you will, companies should do if building and maintaining trust is a concern. The number one thing is to get absolutely obsessed with consistency. Some of you may have heard me say before that I think the right customer experience strategy for every company everywhere is to be consistently good and strategically amazing. And that came up in response to people saying, well, you have to wow your customers all the time. And me saying, well, no, that's not actually true. You know, people don't expect to flit from one moment of delight to another. But they do want to know that they can count on you to consistently deliver what they're asking you to deliver in a reliable way. And if and when you're going to wow them, do it in situations where it's going to mean something, it's on brand or something like that. This element of consistency, the reason that I put that into that strategy slogan, for lack of a better term, is because it is the element of trust that most companies struggle with. So when it comes to whether or not a customer trusts you, they're actually looking at four things. Two are kind of right brain, emotional. Two are kind of left brain or cognitive. The more emotional sides of things are, do we think you're a company that operates with integrity? And do we think that you're looking out for our best interests? Those are by no means slam dunks for a lot of companies, but they are things that, especially if someone is already a customer, they probably already believe to a certain extent that you have integrity and you care about their fate as well as your own. The left brain side of trust is a combination of competence. I trust that you are competent to actually do the thing you said that you are going to do. And I trust that you're reliable, especially in B2B, where your deals are getting longer, companies are signing up, their networks are much more integrated, their systems are much more integrated. Knowing that I can count on you not only to deliver competently, but to be there and consistently be there when whatever happens, happens, because we live in an uncertain world. That consistency, that reliability out of those four is the thing that I think most companies have a gap in and have the opportunity to work on. Being internally consistent, right? We do the same things the same ways, and being externally consistent, that we get back to people consistently and they know what to expect from us. So if you're in an organization and as a collective, you're looking at, how do we focus on trust in 2025? I would say take whatever sort of customer obsession programs that you have and make those specifically focused on an obsession with consistency, because that's a big piece of what customers want from you. But that's at the company level, right? You can't, as an individual, control everything you need to control to make sure your company's consistent. So, what can I, Megan Burns, or what can you, individual, do to help build and earn trust with customers or with whoever in the ecosystem you deal with? And there are three things there. These are not theoretical. These are actual things that I do in my practice that I have learned really help to build and maintain trust. The first one seems so simple, it almost seems hard to believe, but it's true. And that is be visible. Right. One of the things that's hard in a digital age is we don't spend a lot of time physically together. We're geographically distributed. We don't get together at events as much. So if people don't see you, if they've never seen you, or if they don't see you that often, there loses a sense of familiarity. And the way humans are wired, we're wired to trust people that we're familiar with. Even just having seen your face, seen your name, seen you comment on something on LinkedIn, it's not going to be the thing that makes the difference, but it gets the ball rolling. It gets you a step towards being someone that they're familiar with, they like, and they could see themselves trusting. So when you go out and think about social media and think, oh, I don't really like doing social media, which I'll be honest, I do too. Think about it as an opportunity to build connections and build trust with interesting people, just by being a part of the community and making yourself visible. The sort of fancy name for this in psychology is mere exposure. But you can't just have it be one-sided, right? You may trust people that you see and follow on LinkedIn, but ultimately you want to get to the point where you're actually talking to another human being, right? So what do you do then? It's the first time you're meeting them. How do you start to build that trust and rapport? The trick that I've used, and it's not a trick, it's a strategy or a technique, is I always try to start the conversation with a question. And not like, hey, how are you? Something that shows a little bit more of a concern and a little bit more of an understanding of the context that they're in. So if you're meeting with a busy executive and they're 2 or 3 minutes late to the meeting, I will typically say, do you need a minute? Do you need a bio break? Because we can take a minute before you get started. I'm actually giving up. That is not something that is in my best interest in theory, because I'm giving up time in this meeting with this important person. But it shows them I care about you, I understand your environment, and that I am focused on building a relationship, not just getting whatever I need out of this meeting. It's about 50-50. Some people will say, nope, I'm good. Let's keep plowing through. Other people will say, you know what? Thank you so much. If you don't mind, go ahead. But starting with a question like that really starts to bring you and the other person into each other's worlds and build that relationship. Another question that I will sometimes use when I'm doing stakeholder interviews is, how much do you know about who I am and why you are here? And I started asking that question because time after time, I would get on a phone call with a stakeholder and I would launch right into talking about the project that we're doing and why I wanted to talk to them today. And they would kind of go, uh-huh, uh-huh. And it was clear to me that someone they trust had said, hey, will you talk to this Megan woman? And they put the meeting on their calendar, but they had no context, no backstory. So by launching into things and assuming that they had context, they didn't think I was doing anything wrong because they figured, they should have done more prep or paid more attention. But I was giving them the space to acknowledge that, you know what, I'm not sure I remember why I'm supposed to be here, or, nobody ever told me why I'm supposed to be here. It eases a little bit of the tension and it says to them, you know what, it's okay. I know that this is not the center of your world. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Let me do the work of setting the context so that whatever contributions you give make sense and you can really add input in the places that we need and want input. I am showing them that it is okay for them to be vulnerable and admit that they don't know why they're here. And that opening, making them feel comfortable being vulnerable, is another aspect of building trust. I'm saying, you can trust me to not use that against you. In fact, quite the opposite. I want to protect you and make sure that you have all the information you need to give the best input into this project that maybe is third or fourth or 15th on your radar screen. So starting conversations with questions, authentic questions, interesting questions, it's just a way to express curiosity and expressed interest that starts to build that trust and rapport. In addition to that, when you're meeting with people that you've never met before, this is a kind of a combination of the first and second tip. Consider sending out a video in advance. This is another example of being visible. When I'm doing stakeholder interviews, in addition to asking that first question, sometimes I will record a short 30 to 60-second video ahead of time saying, hi, I'm Megan. I'm going to be talking to you for such and such a project. So-and-so thought that you would have some really valuable input to provide. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me, and I look forward to our conversation. That is another level or another degree of familiarity that I can create so that when we do get on the phone, they are not, they don't feel like they're talking to a stranger. They feel like they've met me in a certain way. So I've given you some things at the corporate level. I've given you a couple things at the individual level for when you're meeting or talking with people face to face. But a lot of our communications, much to everyone's chagrin, have to do with email, texting, Slack, whatever, pick your favorite text channel. And these text-based communications are an enormous problem when it comes to building and maintaining trust. And they're a problem because as human beings, we are particularly bad at guessing or evaluating the tone or the emotion or the intent that someone means from a written communication. So I said earlier that trust is partly about, competence and reliability, but it's also partly about intent and integrity. And unfortunately, we tend to read things that other people send to us in a more negative way than they intended it, or sometimes just in a different way than they intended it. And it doesn't actually matter that much how close the relationship is. They did some tests on married couples, happily married couples, and they only guessed the emotion that the writer was trying to convey to their spouse about 65% of the time. They only guessed correctly. So you can assume that whenever you're writing something to someone else, there is a high risk that they could misinterpret your tone, your intention. So the trick that I use there is before I send an email, I read it out loud, and I read it out loud in a bunch of different tones of voice. I close the door to my office before I do that because could make people think that I'm nuts. But if this person thinks I might be mad, how would they read this? If this person thinks I might be scared or worried, how might they read this? If this person thinks that I'm confused or happy, how might they read this? I still ultimately have to do what I can to try to convey that as best I can. But just anticipating how certain words and phrases could land. An example from this wasn't with a customer, but this was me as a customer. I had some work done on my hot water heater. And the plumbing company that did the work on the hot water heater sent me a note afterwards saying the work has been completed and the proper authorities have been notified. You notified the authorities about my water heater? Like, what am I going to jail? Do I have something that's not out of code? I was like, what is that? That one word choice was so triggering. Turns out it just meant they let the building inspector for my city know that they had done the work, which they're legally required to do. But that choice of the word authorities and the connotation that comes with it triggered something in me as the customer that could easily have been avoided if they hadn't used that word, if they'd chosen a different word. So just thinking about the context of your words, what might be a trigger, how they might be read, is something that I think is a really worthwhile exercise, especially with particularly important emails. I mean, if it's that important, it probably shouldn't be an email. It probably should be a phone call or a video call. But if you have to send email, taking the time to kind of play out in your mind what this could sound like in the other person's head, you at least avoid or help avoid doing things that are going to scare them or make them upset that you then have to do repair work for, right? You don't break trust unintentionally in a way that you then have to make up for, because that's a lot of what happens with trust is people don't mean to do things that make other people doubt us, but we do, and then we're in relationship repair mode. So the more conscious you can be about what you're saying and how you're saying it, particularly in written text, the easier it will be to make sure that you don't make a misstep that hurts the trust work that you've been doing. One last thing about written text that I will share has to do with punctuation and emojis. As I was talking about reading emotion in text, some of you were probably thinking, but what about emojis? What about exclamation points? This is a very polarizing topic, surprisingly polarizing topic. Depending on the generation, depending on the person, some people think emojis in professional communications are perfectly fine. In fact, they're fun, they're helpful. Other people think they're a sign that you are immature, unprofessional. And again, their perception is the reality that matters. My friend Josh Burnoff, that I used to work with at Forrester, who's the author of Writing Without BS, he posted something on LinkedIn the other day about the use of exclamation points in professional writing, and how if he sees an exclamation point, he immediately dismisses and doubts the credibility of the person doing the writing. And there was a very long thread of comments after that. Some people said, I agree with you. Other people said, yeah, if it's one exclamation point, that's a way to show emotion. If it's 5 or 6, yeah, that's a little overboard. I think I even wrote in that I'm not a fan of a lot of emojis in professional communication. So if you're using those or thinking about using those as a tool to help make up for some of the lack of emotion that comes through in written communication, just know your audience and do so very carefully, because with some people, they're going to have exactly the effect you intended. With other people, it could end up blowing up in your face. I will very often follow the lead as I get to know someone. I will look at, if they use emojis in communication first. I will use them sparingly. If they don't, I don't. This is one of the new kind of etiquette rules that we're navigating in the digital age. But just think about and be conscious of what that might say to people about your credibility, your professionalism based on the standards that they have in their mind, regardless of what you necessarily intended. So I know that's a lot. And this topic of trust is one that we could go on, honestly, for days and days. But I wanted to give some concrete things, something very focused at the company level. Consistency, consistency, consistency. Beat that drum. That's going to be the biggest thing to help improve trust. And then on the personal level, showing up, being visible, being very thoughtful and curious in how you communicate with people. That curiosity is what helps build relationship rapport and starts to create that trust that we're ultimately trying to create through a screen. Hopefully, I've done a little bit of it today. I'm not sure if I started with a question. I'll have to go back and watch the replay. But this is a constant learning exercise. So if you have your own ideas or your own strategies for ways that you build and maintain trust with people through digital interactions, please share them in the comments. These are just some of the strategies that I've come up with and used over the years. But this is a topic that I think we'll end up coming back to more and more. And so I hope these tips help. And I look forward to hearing yours too. Thanks very much.